Hey friends. So in this video, we're going to discuss the concept of fate that we read in the article. So we get a major distinction in the classical Chinese conception of fate right off the bat. We're familiar with the notion of fate, right? The idea that something's going to happen, right? And we get that, right? We can see this as far back as the Greeks, right? Just remember the story of Oedipus. Oedipus couldn't avoid his fate. So fate is, well, fatalistic in the Western tradition. But in some Eastern traditions, we find that fate is actually negotiable, right? It's influenceable. We can have some say in what our fate is. Even though fate is understood as a kind of command issued by heaven. So that's to say that we aren't totally powerless with respect to what our fate is. So our authors point out that it's a kind of moral imperative, right? That fate is like something we should be doing, or tells us things that we should refrain from doing. Now, in other words, it's a kind of normative constraint. But in describing it as normative, as something that should be the case, that means that there's choice involved. So there's choice, in a sense, of whether we follow our fate, right? Or whether we sort of do what it is we're supposed to be doing, right? In a sense, what the universe has sort of fated for us. So I think a helpful concept here, again, if we find in the reading, is the way that later Confucians thought of actions, right? As the concept of an action. Our authors write that the notion of an action is something that's integrated into a sort of holistic order, like a holistic structure that's associated with heaven's mandate, right? With fate. So what does this mean? Well, it means that our actions, our behaviors, right, what we do, are geared into a kind of normative order of the universe. So we can ask ourselves, right, when we're performing some action or some set of actions, when we're doing things, we can ask ourselves, does this action satisfy what I ought to be doing? So in other words, is my action appropriately geared into the holistic order of the universe in which I'm a part? So this is thinking about action in a very different way than what we find in not just the Western tradition, but also in the Cartesian package, right? In the Cartesian tradition. The difference is this. When we think of an action, we typically think of a solitary individual's behavior, right? Our notion of an action is something that one person does, right? If we're talking about individual action. And it's what one person does based on internal motivations or internal reasons. But in the Confucian tradition, action isn't just about the individual doing the thing, right? Doing the action. Rather, our actions are constrained by what ought to be the case, right? But what ought to be the case is sort of given to us by heaven's mandate, right? We might think of it as by the universe. And so we're sort of this constant sort of recalibrating, right? Checking to see whether we should be doing the things that we are doing. So there's this kind of confluence, this kind of mixing of descriptive and normative considerations in our understanding of action, right? We can do what it is that we're doing, but always in the backs of our minds, we can ask ourselves, is this what I should be doing? Right? Am I properly geared into the normative structure of the world around me?